Good morning. We learned in Tuesday's devotional that it is a command not to complain, and complaining also makes God angry. And I want to share some things today that I learned in my devotions the other day that were of a great help to me, and I hope they will help you as well. First, I want to make sure that you realize that every story in the Old Testament, although it really did happen, it was given to us as a picture, say a sort of a symbolic meaning of something. I believe that many people think that the promised land that the Israelites were going to is a picture of getting to heaven. We even sing songs that convey that thought, but I don't believe that, and let me share with you why. First of all, the Israelites, when they entered into the promised land, immediately they had to fight the battle of Jericho, and in heaven, we will not have to fight any battles. Also, there were enemies and giants in the promised land, and we will have no enemies in heaven. So for those reasons, I don't believe the promised land or Canaan is a picture of heaven, but rather the picture of an abundant Christian life. It's a Christian life in which you will face battles, but because God is with you, you will be victorious. It's a life where you will face people who may try to hurt you, distract you, discourage you, but by God's grace, you will overcome them. It's a life where you will face giants. Maybe the giant of fear or the giant of discouragement, but they will topple. You will defeat them. It's a life where you will face some walls of Jericho, but with God's strength beside you, those walls will crumble. I don't know about you, but I want that kind of Christian life. I want my life to be one of victories and courage and God's blessings along my way. In my devotions the other morning, I was reading in Numbers 14, and I came down to verse 26. Listen carefully. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation, which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say unto them, As truly as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in mine ears, so will I do to you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land. Numbers 14, verses 26 through 30. Now, according to these verses, God would not allow any of the children of Israel that were 20 years and older to enter into the promised land. Why? Because they complained. In these verses, I learned that although it seems just a tiny thing, complaining can have a huge impact on my life. Here's some things that complaining will do to your life. First, complaining kept the children of Israel from entering the promised land, and it will keep you from entering the abundant Christian life God has planned for you. God showed me in these verses that I will never enter into the abundant Christian life, a life where I will have victories in my battles, conquer my giants, and receive all of the blessings that God has ready for me if I complain. And that's not all complaining will do. Let's continue looking at verses 32 through 33 of Numbers 14. But as for you, your carcasses, they shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. The second thing that complaining will do is complaining affects your family. Notice the phrase, your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years and bear your whoredoms. The Israelites' children had to pay for their parents' ingratitude for 40 years. I'm 40 right now, and when I think of the fact that if I was a child of one of those Israelites, I would just now be entering the promised land after wandering my entire life that I've lived thus far, wandering around in the desert. That's just hard for my mind to fathom. That's how much God was displeased with the children of Israel's complaints. When I complain, this verse teaches me that it affects my children. It not only keeps me from having an abundant Christian life, but it keeps my children from it as well. Don't let your children hear you complaining. It will affect their life. When Moses told the children of Israel that God told them they could not go into the promised land because they complained against him and they doubted in his ability to fight their battles for them, the Bible says that they mourned greatly. That's in Numbers 14, verse 39. Well, they decided that they were going to go into the promised land anyway, even though God said they wouldn't. Let's see what happens. And they rose up early in the morning and got them up into the top of the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here, and will go up unto the place which the Lord hath promised, for we have sinned. Listen carefully. And Moses said, Wherefore now do ye transgress the commandment of the Lord? But it shall not prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you, because ye are turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. Numbers 14, verses 40 through 43. I learned from these verses that complaining will cause me to go against the commandments of God, and when I don't obey God's commands, His presence will not be with me. Complaining will cost you the very presence of God in your life. That is why you will not have victory in anything in your Christian life if you are constantly a complainer. The Lord is not among them are some very scary words for a Christian to hear. I don't want that to be true in my life, but it will be if I complain. I never realized before what an impact a small sin like complaining cost me in my Christian life. It cost me the very presence of God. Number 4, complaining will keep us from experiencing victories in our Christian life. But they presumed to go up unto the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that was a symbol of God's presence for the people of Israel, and Moses departed not out of the camp. Then the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in that land, and smote them, and discomfited them, even unto Hormah. Numbers 14, verses 44 through 45. What a sad thing to think that the Israelites tried to fight in their own strength without God's presence, and yet we do it all the time. God's presence will not be with us to help us fight our battles if we are complaining. We think of complaining maybe as just like a little bad habit that I have. I don't think we would even be brave enough to label it as a sin, although that's exactly what it is. My son Andrew the other day had a splinter in his finger. It was so tiny that I could barely see it, and yet it hurt him so much that he wasn't able to write with his pencil with that finger. He asked me to pull it out, and I showed it to him after I pulled it out, and he said, I can't believe something that little hurts so much. Complaining is like that splinter, such a tiny little thing in our life, we think, but the effect it can have on us is unbelievable. I can't believe that something that little can affect our Christian life so much, but it can. Complaining will cost you the abundant Christian life God has for you. It will cost you God's very presence in your life, and it will cost you the victories you should experience in your life. Without God's presence, we are powerless to fight our giants. Complaining, griping, murmuring, such tiny little things, but what a power they have over our life. Get rid of it. Just like I did with Andrew's splinter, pull it out.